everyone. This is part 2 of the Millennial Challenge. For some reason, I can never say that word. The Millennial Challenge, Bridging the Gap. My name is Daniela Labate Cavelli. I am with NIAPers, and we're happy to host you all this afternoon. We've got Lynetta Albright and Jeremy Wright back with us today to sort of take you through this workshop. Before I turn it over to them, just a couple of really quick housekeeping items. As you heard, today's webinar is being recorded. You'll have access to the recording as well as, well, I can't say the PowerPoint because there is no PowerPoint today because we're in the meeting platform and we're just going to have a conversation and do a workshop. So you'll have access to that. We are offering a CEs for today, and for CEs for LMHC, CPRP, LMSW, and LCSWs. In order to qualify for CEs, you've got to be in the Zoom room and not just dialed in on the phone. Our office will be sending you an email of an evaluation form that we'll need you to fill out and return within 48 hours in order to qualify for CEs. So be sure to take advantage of those. With that, I think we're going to just turn it over to Lynetta to start us off.
Great. Welcome everybody, some of you for the first time. And those of you who came back, that's always great when people come back. That lets you know that it must have been of benefit, because you're back, Bridget, Melinda, for a second time, Robin and Janice. So it's good to be with you all again. So I just want to welcome you back. Jeremy, I don't know if you've got anything that you want to say before I dive right in. You're on mute, babe.
Sorry, I was just saying no, you can go ahead.
Okay. I saw in the chat, Daniela, someone asked for the link. So by way of just summary, the first session that we did, when Danielle and I met with Jeremy, he suggested to us, excuse me, that we take the time to lay the groundwork, that we don't just dive in as if we know what your challenges are, that we really spend time with you all to lay the foundation, get things out on the table. What are the challenges that you may be facing when it comes to working with younger generations? So we did a breakout session where you all spent a good amount of time, those who were here, answering questions, and you'll see it in the recording. So I'm glad the recording is available, but everyone answered questions around what excites them, what challenges you have, what strategies you can think of. So there was a really good session, and then people sent us their notes. Danielle, are we going to send the notes out to everybody? Do we want to organize that so people can see what each group did?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Yeah, so we got the notes back, and each group, the reporter from the group only took a minute to say, here's the essence of what we did. And then they sent us their notes. So I figure if we send to people, you'll see ideas that other people came up with in those breakout rooms. So we did that at the last session. The thing that I will share with you and suggest that you use it is something that is called the ACT process that I use with groups when they are working on or in a workshop and listening to ideas and knowledge. And this ACT model is really around getting you to think about what I call the so what question. I get it, I understand, but so what? So what does it mean for me? So what am I going to do with this? I'm going to present a diversity and inclusion model to you all. And then Jeremy's going to work with you all around working with millennials and engagement strategies, and you'll get it. I encourage you to then think about application now. So when you're taking notes, essentially the way this model works is that you're coding your notes. So if you write a note and you say, oh my goodness, I need to change this, put a C next to that note. Or I need to apply this or take action, put an A. Or I need to share this information, teach or transfer it to someone on my team or my boss or whomever. And then when you get back to your office or after the workshop and you're looking for your notes, sometimes it's like, I know I wrote this down somewhere. If you code them, what it is you want to do. So you're thinking about application today, right now. You're going to go back through your notes and you're going to list all of your A's, C's, and T's in this first column. And you work one across. What will you do, with whom, and how will you know it's making a difference? So this is a model I took from my mentor, John Maxwell. He was talking about this ACT thing in a workshop, and I said, oh, I'm turning that into a document. So you all have this document. Daniela sent it out with those who registered, and it's self-explanatory. But I always want to encourage people before we do anything is that you don't see this as an event. You know, we overestimate events and we underestimate the process. And this has been a process. It's how we designed it in this part 1 and part 2. So part 1 was laying the foundation. Part 2, today we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion, but the biggest part of today is something Jeremy's going to do with you around creating a framework for engaging the younger generations. So here's the agenda. Did the agenda pop up, Daniela, if I've done this correctly? Yep, okay. So we're going to hear from those of you who were with us before, and our call to action was to ask you to pick one thing that you'll do differently with younger generations in your organization. So we're hoping to hear from a couple of you. What's one thing you did differently since our last session? And then I'm going to go over this diversity and inclusion model. Then Jeremy's going to engage with you. We've got a short video. It's going to engage with you around some strategies for working with younger generations. So that's our plan for today. You have the recording from the last time. And so what I'd like to do now is open up the floor. And for those of you who were with us, what's one thing you did differently? An A, a C, or a T? What's one thing you did differently after our first session? Bridget, I'm looking directly at you because you're just always so engaging. Bridget, anything you want to report out that you may have done differently or thought about since our last session?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I did was we have an administrative meeting, and I always get very excited when I'm in a workshop or whatever, and I always report out to everyone. And so some of the highlights and things that really stuck with me, I brought to the group and talked to them about and asked them if they had some experiences that they felt with some of their younger staff that maybe we could work on as a group. So we're talking about that, and it began to raise the issue and also look at really the strengths of that group that we have, which I think a lot of it was when we have a meeting, what's really going wrong, or what do we need to change, or what are the problems? And so we kind of refocused it, which was really nice. And I remembered that some of the millennials in the group from the first training were saying that they didn't always feel heard, and they didn't feel they had a place to contribute, and was there space for them? So that really resonated with me. And so what I haven't done, but I'm planning on doing is, I have a couple of people in mind that I want to talk to individually and ask them, is there something that they can work on with all of us and take leadership on so that we can learn from their experiences? And I'll help them in whatever way that I can from my experience in doing trainings and so forth. But I want to see what they come up with. How do they approach, sharing an idea, teaching an idea to the group, rather than going from the framework that I'm most familiar with as a teacher, as an administrator, as an
Yeah.
older social worker.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I want to see how that works out.
Bridget, that is great. Jeremy, I don't know if you have any responses. Bridget, I'm a former teacher, and I had to really shift my thinking to asking questions. And when you said ask them, when I think about engaging the next generation, when I think about engaging anyone, I've learned that great questions, good leaders ask great questions. And so that's a great question for you to ask and see what they think. That is wonderful, Bridget. Anything, Jeremy, that you raised up for you as you listened to Bridget?
No, I mean, I think that's a great approach. I would agree with what you said. So.
Yeah, that asking them what would they do is a perfect way to engage them. Bridget, thank you. Anyone else try anything different or anything resonate that stayed with you up until today? Melinda, I'm looking at you now. If you've gotten used to me, I like to call on people.
I would say for me, with regards to having a lot of younger people working on my staff, just to open my mind to the fact that they do have a different lens that they see and hear things from, and to be more patient with them. And I feel like I've been spending a lot more time, I guess, educating them on what the expectations are and whether, they feel they can meet that. And if not, how can we meet in the middle?
Oh, I like that. That expectations is a big one. A lot of times, not only our younger generations, but our employees in general. I've had many say, if we could if the onboarding were better and we really understood what the expectations were, and if we were allowed to ask questions to get clarity around that, Melinda, that's pretty cool. How many younger folk do you have at your organization?
Well, I could just speak for my program. Within my program, which I have about 30 people total that are under me, I would say at least half, probably a little bit more. Yeah.
So this is important to you.
Yeah. If I want to survive and continue to work in this population, yeah, I would say so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else? Is it Honora Stefan? Am I pronouncing your name? You mentioned in the chat you were with us at the first session. You're unmuted. Want to share?
Hi,
anything?
yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So, I was listening to what all the other people said, and I agree. I think one of the other things that, I found was really helpful is providing some flexibility with the staff and allowing them, giving them kind of more time, and also allowing them to work from home, which they have found to embrace and have found that to be beneficial in regards to their work. I think the other thing is, definitely asking questions. What is it that they see? What is it they feel that they can do better? Or how can we work together? How can we partner with one another to be able to get this job done? Because we know that the work that we do is not easy.
That's wonderful. Asking questions and flexibility. So working at home is something that people coming out of the pandemic, is that one of the benefits, would you say, that people are enjoying working remotely? Honora?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm finding that they're definitely enjoying working remotely. I think that there is less interruption during the day. There's less of the, kind of water cooler kind of idea. And I think that people are more productive because they're in a place where they want to be. Some people are saying that they do want to come into the office, and those people are allowed to come into the office. But I think, in this environment, we are able to provide those services, from our own home. And I think the clients that we work with are appreciating it as well. Not everyone, some people like the face-to-face contact, but, telehealth is actually kind of changed our world. And I think that both the staff and the clients enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. I think many providers I work with who thought and kept saying, when are we going to get back to normal? When are we going to get back to normal? Don't know that we're going back and don't know if we want to go back. There's
Right.
something about going back as related to going forward. And you mentioned flexibility. So then there have been providers that said, this remote thing has really increased engagement, increased access, certainly if folk want to come in person, but we're going to continue to train, and we're really looking at how to make this permanent. So it sounds like you all have a little bit of both to offer to people.
Yeah, one of the other things that I found very interesting at the last session was the discussion on, the millennials and their entitlement, when in fact a lot of them are very insecure. So I think it's really important to let people know, when they're doing a good job, and, when they need some changes, like how can we work together to make those changes? Because I think, people do need to be recognized.
Yes, yes. I think that was one of the things, Jeremy, you talked about. Sometimes we think that our younger generations are confident, but we want to get beyond. I don't want to paraphrase it, Jeremy. You talked a little bit about being cautious of that and recognizing that.
Yeah, and she was spot on. So like I think what you noticed and what you did as a result, or how you processed was spot on. But I'll talk more about that later too. So we'll expound upon it a little bit more.
Right.
But what you all have done so far is really cool.
Excellent. Anybody else want to share anything that you thought about that resonated or that you've tried since our first session? Nadine, I see you're unmuted. Does that mean you want to share anything with us? Or maybe you didn't mean to unmute? Okay, so what we're going to do next, and I'm just going to encourage you, keep listening to each other and really keep those A's, C's, and T's in front of you. Because the whole thing is there's a gap between what we know and what we do. And using that ACT process is a way to fill that gap. You can take in all these great ideas that Bridget and Nora and Melinda shared with us, and maybe think about, what might I try? What might I do differently? And today, we're really focusing first on you all. As you begin to work with younger generations, what's your mindset? What do you think about the next generation and the challenges, and what's your role in bridging that gap? Do you go first? Do you go first, or do you wait for them to go first? Bridget, I think you talked about asking them questions, and you also a little bit of self-awareness that you shared, that, I'm a social worker and I'm a teacher. And so I've got to shift the way I'm working with the younger generation. So that's some self-awareness, Bridget. And I think that comes first with all of us, to get self-aware about what are we thinking? What are we thinking about the next generation? So I'm going to show you, I'm going to shift, and know that you can interrupt. Unmute yourselves. You don't have to wait for us to unmute. Unmute yourselves if you've got any questions. Before I turn it over to Jeremy, I wanted to share with you a model that I use. I do a diversity and inclusion workshop. And one of the things that is the hallmark of this particular model is called the Pciho model. That in our groups, when you're working with groups and you're working with the organization, that everyone has a role in diversity and inclusion. How do you include other people, and how do you understand everyone's role? And Bridget, you talked about asking questions. We want to understand who people are in our teams and in our organization. So for each one of these roles, pioneer, champion, influencer, hesitators, and obstructors, they're all there in the organization. And this model essentially walks across the purpose of the pioneer is to create and cast a vision for change. So Bridget, you were the pioneer. You cast this vision when you went back and reported it out. The champions on the team support the vision and the plan. The influencers are people in the organization. Who are the influencers in that younger generation that carry the message to the community? So when I think about working with younger generations, they're pioneers, champions, influencers, then they're hesitators. There will be that next generation person or older generations that are gonna just wait and see. We're talking about changing, I'm just gonna wait and see. This is the purpose column. And the obstructors, their purpose is to be obstructive to change. I don't wanna change. I don't think we need to change. The interesting thing for me is that we need all of these people on our teams. We need obstructors. You know, sometimes people think obstructors are bad to have on your team. Not necessarily, because they caution us. And then for the pioneer, what motivates each one of these roles? The pioneer is motivated because they want to bring out the best. The champions want to be on a winning team. Influencers are the peacemakers. They help to move people into action. Hesitators don't want to rock the boat. They're motivated by maintaining the status quo, and obstructors have a fear of change, the unknown. So I think it was Jeremy and Honora that was talking about, we think the next generation is confident, and yet they may appear to be obstructing. They may appear, but maybe there's a fear there. Maybe there's a fear. So we want to understand the purpose and the motivations. The pioneer identifies empowered. I'm empowered. That's how I identify. Supportive, of course, is the champion. Influencers are always enthusiastic. Always enthusiastic. Hesitators, while you sometimes think that a hesitator is being negative, well, actually, they identify as being responsible. And obstructors identify as being right. That's why we obstruct, because we think we've got the answer. And this is the self-talk each one does. The pioneer, this is why the pioneer jumps out there, because they say this is wrong. We're not including all generations. We're not looking at the diversity in our organization. It's wrong. And what can I do to change it? What can I do? And the champion says, how can I help? And how can I add value? And then there's the enthusiastic influencer says, I need to spread the word. I'm in and I want to get others to join. How can I help take this further? The hesitator is now asking themselves questions in this self-talk. Is this safe? Is this safe for us? Let's wait and see. Don't stick your neck out. The obstructor is saying this won't work. This is not going to work. Here we go again, Bridget. You got another idea. This is a waste of time. And this is the biggest thing with working with younger generations, providers thinking we don't have this problem. Because if we say we got the problem, then we got to do something. So the obstructors are saying we don't have this problem. Now, in all of these roles, there is a growth piece for each one. So for the pioneer, it is important for the pioneer to be clear, clarify your vision, and make it safe for everyone to join you. How do you make it safe for those in the younger generations or diverse populations that you serve? I've heard many providers, one provider, a large organization I work with, they say that those in the LGBTQ plus group don't feel safe. They don't feel safe. They feel like there's a lot of stigma from the front door all the way through. So how do you, the pioneer, make it safe? And being vulnerable and asking questions is one way to do that. Champions, you will need to bring some structure and organization to it, because you're supportive and you're thinking of ways to help. You don't want to go, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You want to celebrate every little step. So it's not just the champion for the big goal. You want to make sure that you understand every single step should be celebrated. And influencers, while you're wanting to spread the word, you want to ask yourself, how can you use your voice? How can you bring your voice alive? And can you move with intention and purpose? You want to influence, you want to bring others along. So you want to look at some of these actions. So these are actions for each one to take. And the hesitator, this is the question. What's one thing you can do? And can you risk getting it wrong? These are questions that people don't usually, as a coach, I ask people questions that they're kind of afraid to ask themselves, because a hesitator is thinking, okay, can I risk this? I want to go with them, but can I really risk this? So these are actions for the hesitator, questions to ask themselves. And then the obstructor, mentioned flexibility. The obstructor, while they have a fear of change and they're saying this won't work, what we really want to get them to do and ask them to think about is being open-minded. Can you be open-minded? You may not want to do it, but can you at least be open-minded and try and understand the other perspectives, the other side, declaring noble intent? Because I know you're not obstructing, you're not a rebel without a cause. There are reasons why you don't want this to work, or maybe you do want it to work and you don't trust what we're doing. Then finally, for the obstructor, it's sort of like saying, okay, well, you can't be open-minded and you don't want to declare noble intent. If you can't be for it, then maybe just not be against it. So this is what's called the Pciho model. And the intention of this model is to get a group to understand that whenever you're changing, whenever you want to include people, whenever you're looking to shift your culture, that all of these models, all of these roles are on your team. All of those roles are on your team. Lupe, I got a thumbs up from you. I don't know if that's what the thumbs up was about, but I wanted to share that model, something you could take with you. Daniela, I'll send that one slide. It's copywritten in a way, but I share it with people as part of a larger program, but I found it useful in working with different groups as they think about everybody is not going to agree, and nor should they. It's not going to be easy for everyone, and nor should it be. And each one of those roles, if we could understand, like if I understand that Michelle is an influencer. Michelle's an influencer. I understand what motivates her. I understand the questions, the self-talk she's having. And even if I don't want to assume it, Michelle, I've got the questions to ask you to double check, to see, is this what motivates you, Michelle, so that we can see when we're working on something, how best do you fit? Because everybody has a role. If we're going to shift something, Bridget, everybody has a role, the younger generation and all of us. So I wanted to share that model for you all to consider, see if anyone has any questions. Just unmute yourself or raise your hand. And we've got about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to turn things over. Any questions on that Pciho model? Any thoughts, reflections, etc.? I see a message in the chat. Each role is needed. You're absolutely, and that's empowering. When you look at empowering the younger generation, let them know you are in this. We're all in it together. We need you. And it is empowering you. I absolutely agree with that. Jency, you are unmuted. Did you want to add anything? Nadine, you're unmuted. Just checking. Okay. So I will get that slide to Daniela and we'll send it out, Daniela, after the session. So I'll just send those 2 slides and you can kind of check it out. If you've got any questions, you've got my email, you can email me later. And I think that's it. The last question I wanted to ask though, how many people in the room right now are under the age of 35? You want to raise your hand, put in the chat, under the age of 35. Let's see if we've got any millennials in the room besides Jeremy. No millennials in the room that I see yet. Nobody's putting in the chat. Okay. All right, cool. So Jeremy, I'm gonna show the video that you sent me and then you'll take over, or what would you like me to do, sir?
Just pause for a moment and we're going to put on the video. So I want to kind of make a segue to that that we saw. So you saw that piece on working with different people who have different styles and different motivations. And it's really important now to look at how we treat diversity and inclusion for how we treat generational diversity and inclusion. And diversity and inclusion when we look at our thought processes and how those work. And so I think that that was a critical way to kind of frame ourselves for the day, to look at how we're going to engage with people who are different from us. Now I'll talk about a lot more about the ways in which those differences can appear. And hopefully it'll help you to develop some understanding about how to engage with your staff in a new and in a different kind of way. And so that's why we wanted to add that, because we look at the trend right now as diversity inclusion in terms of race and gender identity and those kind of things. And we forget to look at diversity of thought and generational gaps and things like that, which is what we focus on today. So to kind of segue into that, before we kind of look at breaking that down and looking at the ways in which you're going to see that manifest and the things that you can do about it, I wanted to kind of break the ice a little bit. We'll show a little video. This might be what some of you all experience, hopefully not to this level, when you're interviewing or talking with a millennial. So now we can play the video.
Okay.
All right.
All right, share sound. And make sure I do this right this time, Daniela. You see the video, Jeremy, before I start?
Yeah, we
Yep,
see it.
okay. Okay, great.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No,
PowerPoint?
no,
Publisher?
not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people like my parents. That's funny.
Well, Amy, when you're working for me, you have to have those kind of research skills because I'll send you things for you to comb through and get the answers and send them to me. So for that, you got to be really good at technology.
For stuff like that, no problem. I'll just ask Siri.
You'll just ask Siri?
You know, Siri, tell me this, Siri, find me that. We're all good at getting you the answers.
Tell Siri, I want you ready to go at 8 sharp each and every morning.
I don't understand
What don't you understand?
what you just said.
You don't understand be ready to go?
No. You said 8, right?
Yes.
8 like in the morning, 8?
Yes, in the morning.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't work for me. Who gets up at 8?
I do.
I Skype with my French boyfriend in Paris until like 3 in the morning. I don't even get to Starbucks until like 10, where I order my grande chai tea latte, 3 pumps, skim milk, light water, 2% foam, extra hot, but not too hot. So if it's okay, I work best in the morning at 10:45.
Wow. Amy, I don't think we're going to be a good fit.
Why are you so negative? I can sense your hostilities, and right now I am not feeling very safe. I've been here for over 5 minutes, and the only nice thing you have said to me was nice resume, which I typed all night for this meeting with you. You've given me no guidance, no validation, no encouragement, no supervision. Is there an HR director somewhere?
HR director?
Yes, I need to speak to someone. I may have to take off today as a mental health day.
Take today off. Amy, look at me. You don't work here.
Are you firing me?
Okay, yes.
Okay. So hopefully that just brought a little humor, and nobody is really, experiencing that level of interviewing when you have to interview with a millennial. I know that people have some issues and some exacerbated problems, and that kind of shows parts of what we may be experiencing to a heightened level. Or at least I hope to a heightened level for many of you don't have people on your team that are doing that exactly. But what's led us to this point? And I want to talk a little bit about some of the statistics and things that millennials are experiencing in comparison to the other generations. And then we'll talk about how in which you can apply some of those things to, your work environment and what's happening. So in the last session, we watched a video by Simon Sinek, and I would definitely suggest that you watch the video from Simon Sinek. You can watch several from him on the millennial problem, on working with millennials. If you YouTube some of those videos, that would be awesome. But you can also look at the recording from the last one to see the video that we showed. I'm going to break down some of the pieces of that video to talk about some of the ways that millennials have kind of been shaped to have some of the circumstances that are going on in their work lives. So if you could, we're going to have Lynetta, if you could send the tool out. So she's going to send that in the chat, but we'll also send it to you via email. And it's going to be a Millennial Workplace Engagement Tool. And it's going to break down some of the things that I'll talk about today. You can use it to kind of, make notations for yourself and look at how you're going to engage after this. So we hope that you're going to be active with that. But let's talk a little bit about some stats, right? What make up millennials? First of all, who are the millennials? What are they? Where do they come from? You're going to get a range of dates for millennial birth years, but it's going to be anywhere from like the mid 80s to the mid 90s. So you're going to be anywhere from like 81 and 96 will be the millennial generation, which is the one we're focusing on today. But you also have Generation Z that is coming up behind the millennials that are becoming adults right now, which are people born from about 97 to 2012. Prior to the millennials, you've got Gen X, which are about 85 to 1980 or 82 or 3, depending on, how you look at it, you'll get different definitions. And the baby boomers born from 46 to 64. And then you have the silent generation that was born between 28 and 1945. And many of those people in those generations, because of what we have going on now, are still in our workforce as well. So you want to look at, all of these spaces for things. But let's focus on kind of our younger generation. You don't have as many Gen Z, so we won't focus on that today. We're going to strictly kind of focus on millennials and how those differences are occurring. So one of the things culturally that you'll look at between working and relating to millennials, a lot of us will talk about our family lives and what's going on. And millennials have a starkly different experience from many of the rest of the generations, particularly those that occurred before them. So they're delaying marriage, they're slower to form households, they are more likely to live at home for longer stretches of time. So between 25 and 37, double the millennials live with their parents versus baby boomers who live with their parents in that same time span. You're going to find that more of them are living with their parents, less of them are getting married, and less of them are having children. And so many of us go into situations. I remember doing an interview with an organization out in Michigan, and I felt like a fish out of water because everybody's conversation was about their kids and their wife and that was everybody's conversation. That's how they related to each other. And I don't have those things. So I'm not married, I don't have kids. So I was at the table, and I was able to have conversations with them, but that was the relation. What are your kids doing? And I was like, I don't have any kids. So even as we had conversation, it was not as relatable for me because of the experience that I had. And so that. Also, even though millennials have a bad reputation for job hopping, they actually statistically don't job hop any more than people who are in Generation X. So the generation that preceded them. So we don't actually see that. But they are struggling with different kinds of situations and problems. So for example, millennials have less wealth than the baby boomer generation in the same space and time, which has never before occurred. This is the first generation to actually have less wealth than their parents for doing some of the same jobs. So millennial with a bachelor degree and a full-time job earned a median income of $56,000 in 2018. That is roughly equal to what Generation X was getting in 2001. So in this time, inflation has happened to the point where millennials are not outpacing the generations before them. So the median income for somebody with a bachelor's degree is the same as it was in 2001 for Generation X. So, which is crazy, really, really crazy. And so you'll see a lot of people trying to find their place, trying to find a job that fits and also meets the needs of the growing inflation that we have nowadays. So a lot of the job hopping and things like that are related to that. So you may notice people told you when you were growing up, hey, you go to college, you come out, you get a job, you have this situation. Millennials are growing up in a starkly different environment than people. When they come out from college, most people have a college degree. Not most people, but many people have a college degree. And they're not making the kind of money in comparison to the expenses that, was there. Also, the gap is increasing hugely. So for people who had some college education, it was about $36,000 that they're making in on average. So in the median level, people who have some college, not a bachelor's degree, making about $36,000. Baby boomers reported in 1982 making $38,900 for those with some college. So millennials with some college actually make less than baby boomers did in 1982, having some college. So their experience of the workforce, what it's like, and what work value is a lot different for them. So we're not coming out with the same value in our 401ks, and retirement looks a lot different. When I go in and look at benefits, I'm going to look a lot differently than somebody who might be a baby boomer, who may have had a pension, who may have had a lot of different options at their disposal. Right now, any retirement plan that I look at is probably not actually going to get me through retirement without some supplemental things that I have to do for myself. So that's something that you also look at. Then we look at mental health and things like that, which I know a lot of you may come from that field of addiction and things like that. So they have higher rates of anxiety, of depression, of all of those kind of things that are going on. So since 2019, and that's since we had COVID and all that. So since 2019 alone, we have a 12% increase in major depression, 7% increase in alcohol use disorder, 5% increase in tobacco and other substance use disorder. But that is just the leaps that we've had in the last couple of years. If we look at since 2014, 39% increase in ADHD diagnosis since 2014 for people in this group, and a 43% increase in major depression. So a lot of issues and landscape problems in the environment that exist for this group of people. And I wanted to give you that history because in the same way that we look at diversity and inclusion and look at studying the culture of another person, it's important for us to understand what is the lens that this group is coming from and what are they talking about when we discuss things. Now, what do we do about that is another question we'll look at. And how we work in those spaces. So before I go on, though, any questions about some of the stats and things, anything to add or stuff like that that you have? Okay, making sure I'm checking, no chat, nothing like that. Okay, so that's the landscape. That's what we're looking at. That's the kind of history that millennials have grown up with. But with the tool that you have, we'll talk a little bit about how we can engage with our millennials in a little bit different. And I'm going to break that down into 4 parts, which you can follow in the Simon Sinek video and things like that. One, he talks about failed parenting. I'm going to talk about less work environment experience that millennials might have a little bit, strategies to do that. There's also technology, impatience, and environment. Okay, so let's start off.
Do you want me to either pull up a whiteboard or do you want me to actually pull up the tool and as you go through it?
No, you can pull up the whiteboard in a moment, but
okay, cool.
Yeah. So for the less work environment experience, this is one thing you want to understand about millennials. Like we talked about, many of them live with their parents for longer periods of time at higher percentages, right? But we also see some different things. So more often, we are seeing individuals have their first work experiences after college. In addition, social engagement outside of technology has been much more limited, right? So you're going to see individuals like, for example, I'm what would be considered an older millennial. So I'm on the higher scale of millennial. I'm 34 now. So I'm on the older end of millennials. For me, I started working when I was 14, worked when I was 14 on a work permit. And then I worked when I was 16 at McDonald's, did a lot of stuff like that. High school jobs and things like that for millennials, although they're heightening now because we have a lot of shortages for workers now. High school people are back to work. But in the millennial generation, a lot of people did not do that. A lot of people did not work. So their first work experiences may be with you. Maybe right out of college. And you think of somebody with a college degree, maybe even possibly a master's degree, as somebody that has a certain level of experience. And that may not be the case. You may be looking at training somebody and talking to somebody about soft skills of working in the work environment that they have not had, which is okay. So the application for that, what do you do about that? So, okay, so what? They have less work experience. What do I do? So you want to create opportunities for role playing and questions surrounding real world applications. And so one of the big things I'm going to weave throughout is about this emphasis on training and how we train. So often we have talked about how we train on the actual workflows, and people will say, you know, I need more training on this system, on this application, on Excel, on the whatever system, EMR you use, the electronic medical record that you use. I need more training in that. And millennials probably need a lot less training in those areas and a lot more training in the soft skills and in the real world environment situations. And so as much role playing as you could do, the better. So instead of saying this is what you click and how you click and what you open, talking about when you click this, we're looking at these things. So talking more about general concepts and the things that are happening behind the scenes while you're using the technology is probably twice as important as looking at the use of the application itself. So observe and sit in when possible, rather than only listening to feedback from staff, and create ways to train and engage surrounding observations without belittling. So I'm going to be honest, a lot of times you'll have millennials, and especially in some of the younger generations, that are sensitive. And those sensitivities are going to exist, and they're going to take things harshly, because a lot of times they haven't had that kind of feedback. And so when you do give feedback, you want to give it in a really constructive way, if at all possible. The other thing, we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that because of the Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and probably not as much Facebook now, but TikTok generation, people are very used to putting on filters. So I'm going to tell you I'm confident. I'm going to tell you I'm great. I'm going to tell you I'm doing well and I know how to do it. Whatever you put out in front of me, I'm going to tell you that. That doesn't mean that I don't have insecurities or that I understand everything, which means that it's important for you as a supervisor or a manager to observe the actual behavior and what's happening, and not only receive feedback from your staff, because they may present and say, I know it, I understand. And then when you watch, you may see a very different story. And so it's important that you do those observations. Spend time coaching and give opportunities to build confidence in different areas, and create direct ways in which individuals can see how what they do impacts company goals. That is huge, so that you can make those steps appropriate. One of the things that I tried to do in my career at an FQHC is talk to my staff about how what they click and what forms they have someone fill out and what they do impact all the way up to our fiscal bottom line and all of that kind of stuff. How does what you do affect what our goals are? You want to draw direct lines and pathways to that, so people can see how what they do impact the overall organization. Very clearly, you want to do that. So the other piece, we'll move to tech. Well, let me pause for a minute. Any questions about that? About work environment and things like that? Does it make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down. I see some nods of the people who have their camera on. Love a good camera on. Yes, okay. So we're going to technology.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I mean, I know I'm not a participant, but as usual, I learn everywhere I go. This piece about being sensitive, and I do notice that, and I struggle. I mean, being empathetic and compassionate, but that being sensitive, millennials being more sensitive. What do you do?
So one of the things that you do with that, with anybody who's sensitive, and I don't want to say walk on eggshells, but you want to, first of all, create environments that are trusting and that begot feedback. So for examples, we want to have an environment where feedback is given regularly, where it's given openly, and where you actually model how to receive that feedback. And so even asking your staff questions about, what's going on. So for example, like if I post something on Snapchat or on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, I'm looking at the likes, and it's much less likely that I'm going to get all of this negative feedback. So I'm getting the post and I'm getting positive enforcement and all of that from those things. And I'm not having to deal with people a lot face to face. On average, and I'm going to insert this here instead of later in the presentation, we're looking at, and this is not millennial stats, but 12-year-olds spend about 8 to 9 hours a day on social media. 8 to 9 hours a day on social media. And so most of their interaction with friends, with other people is through that platform. And so to get a direct person coming to you to say, hey, this is wrong, this is not right, you need to do so and so, is an affront to someone who does not have to always interface with people. And that's on the far end of it. Millennials don't spend quite as much time as that. But in a lot of ways, especially some of your younger ones, you have that situation. And so you have to handle it in a different type of way. So you want to create environments and formats where that's a regular occurring situation.
And then Robin said to you in the chat, I definitely agree with the feedback and guidance part, all the systems and subsystems, but the reasons and impact. She said, I get lost. Robin, I just read that. I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly for you. Can you unmute? Or maybe she's not able, or she or he. Oh, there you go, Robin.
Oh, no, I was just saying I agree that I would benefit more from feedback and guidance because I know all of the systems. I know how to use everything. Sometimes the reasons why and the impact it has on the work and everything, it gets lost for me.
Are you a millennial, Robin?
Yes.
You should be proud. You should be
Too,
proud.
Robin. All right.
That's right, Jeremy.
So, but like Robin, I think that I value that in a lot of ways. You know, we can sit in a training and we'll say, you know, here's the system, here's how it works, here's click, click, click. But, you know, what I want to understand is why and how and what we're doing behind it. And what we take for granted in a lot of ways is this is a generation, and we look more and more at this, that has grown up with technology. And the younger you get, the more technology that they have. So again, like me as an older millennial, I remember the advent of the internet and of cell phones and of all of that kind of stuff happening. But if you talk to somebody who's 25, it was always there for them in most cases. So they never knew a world without that. And so their level of engagement with technology is totally different. So now you can hand a 2-year-old a phone and say, find something. They're going to go to YouTube, find a video, look it up, and go sit in the corner and know how to use that phone. And they're 2. And then you go and try to teach, you know, your parent how to use the phone. And it might take you a long time to figure that out. And for some reason, we've lopsidedly trained to people who know this stuff innately. It's like me telling you now how to use a mouse. I'm explaining to you, when you use a mouse, you're going to click on the left side of the mouse and you're going to fall dead to sleep because you've been doing that for a long time. Same thing with a millennial. You spending a lot of time talking about technology and how you use the system, and we could do that in our sleep. So the real stuff is, I haven't had work experience. I don't know about this, and I don't know how this impacts the company. And that's what I want to know. So so here we go. Technology. So like I talked, and I dipped and dabbled into this a little bit. High levels of exposure to technology at younger ages has made an extremely tech savvy generation. So that's a great part. It's a benefit. Some of the benefits, they actually do have benefits to having millennials a little bit. However, high levels of exposure to social media has sometimes led to technological addictions, lower self-esteem, and a tendency to mask flaws. So we talked about that masking flaws before and why you want to observe what's actually happening. So the application of this is leverage what is innate to the group. And I'm going to give you an anecdote for this. And that's like tech and social media. So I worked in community health for the last 10 years at least. And for majority of that part, I spent time at one of the largest FQHCs in the country. And we had about 39 health centers at our height at that time. So we had about 39 health centers. And we're known across the country. We were doing a lot of great things. One of the things that we worked with was the LGBTQ community in infectious disease and combating HIV and AIDS. So we worked with that community a lot, and we had a grant called Ryan White, which allowed for us to pay for HIV services and things like that. But when the Affordable Care Act came out, we had to pivot a lot. So a lot of you know about how when the Affordable Care Act came, if your state was engaged in that way, when the Affordable Care Act came, A lot of grant programs either died by the wayside or they were used a lot less because people had this new insurance that they were able to use, right? And so people had choices. They didn't have to come to you as an FQHC, or they didn't have to come to your place. And so you had to learn how to get these people on board and actually engage and actually have, good rapport. Not that you already didn't, but some of our places could use a little massaging in the areas of customer service and things like that. And so what we realized is once we started losing Ryan White, our patient load started going down. In the same time, we started getting the advent of a drug called PrEP. And so if you guys are not familiar with that, it's a drug that's taken daily to prevent the contraction of HIV. And so people take that drug daily. A lot of people in the MSM community, the men who sleep with men community, are prescribed PrEP to help to combat that. But a lot of different people are. You may be in a relationship with someone who's positive. You may be a sex worker. You may do a lot of different things that expose you at higher levels to the potential of contracting HIV. And so to get this out into the community, we had to use different strategies to do that. There's a organization that that's here and also an FQHC called Howard Brown. Experts at working with this community, LGBTQ community. And what they have is a lot of people that are engaged in this community directly. So people who are actually from the LGBT community, and they have a lot of young people hired there. And so what they did was they went on dating apps, on hookup apps, on all of that kind of stuff, and they were prescribing PrEP. They had people with profiles on those PrEP saying, I'm somebody who can help you get on PrEP. What do you do? And they let their young people directly go to the population that they were looking at. Now, for the longest, we were there saying, hey, they're doing this. We need to do this. And our traditional marketing team was saying, no, we're going to do flyers. We're going to put stuff on billboards. We're going to do a bus ad. We're going to do this. And Howard Brown ate our lunch. They took most of our LGBTQ patients because of what was going on, And so in that, we really learned to trust that group. And I think in a lot of ways, when you want to engage, leverage that from the millennials, leverage that because they know it like the back of their hand. Give them some of the problems, some of the issues that are going on, some of the ways you want to engage and reach people. And it's going to change how you look at stuff. Even now, we look at what's happening with social media, and it's changing drastically. What you know about social media is probably a lot differently than what people are doing. So like, for example, you may want to reach a 12-year-old. And now the interview that would just happen on CBS this morning, Nate Burleson did a interview with his daughter, who's 12. And he was like, do you use Facebook? She said, no, I don't have Facebook. Do you use Instagram? She's like, I have an account. I don't use it. Do you use TikTok? Yes, that's what I use. Or I'm using some of these other applications that some of you may have not even heard of before. And she still is spending that 9 to 10 hours a day on these social media apps. And it's stuff that we're not even looking at now. So if you want to reach a 12-year-old or you want to reach the parents of that 12-year-old, how do you do that? It's going to be with this group. And so handing that kind of stuff over is going to change it drastically. And I bet you we wouldn't have had our lunch ate by Howard Brown if we had done that a little bit differently in the organization that I work with. So you want to leverage that. Again, shorten technology training whenever possible and put emphasis on the concepts and the soft skills around those workflows. Create technology-free or limited spaces to increase in-person engagement. And that is to help people learn how to engage in a different type of way in person. Because a lot of times we have our phones and stuff. And I think somebody in the last time said, how do you do that? How do you police that? Easy ways, not necessarily saying you just can't have your phone because you're probably going to lose that battle. But you can do times where that happens. We don't do this in the conference room, or we have this one particular meeting where everybody's phone is gone, or we do those type of things. And that's going to help to increase the way that they engage. Questions there, comments there.
I have a comment about the soft skills.
Sure.
I definitely do understand how that might be an area that lacks. And I try to be as detailed in my communication with some of my younger staff. But I think also it takes a lot from the person who's constructing all this, creating all these documents, sending emails, supervising. And it's almost like I'm just like holding hands. Like I have to hold hand to that, to the younger staff to do that. And it gets overwhelming at some point. How do I check in with myself not to kind of get frustrated or overwhelmed when I'm trying to kind of coach through a staff member? Because I get a lot of the, I don't understand. And I'm like, I just sent a very long email. How can I help you understand? Why don't you? And I try to reframe it. Tell me in your own words what I'm trying to tell you. But I find that I'm at a point where I'm getting frustrated and I don't know how to continue that.
So one of the things that you just said is probably the wrong strategy. Absolutely. Let me say that. A long email is probably the worst way you can communicate with a millennial, because I'm going to be honest, like we're going to read about 3 paragraphs at most. If you have any more than that, we lost it. It didn't come out through. We didn't see that. And that's not to say that that's okay, but it's to say that that's probably what you're dealing with. So one of the things that I found in working with millennials, because it's the way that I process and communicate, I probably have a little ADHD a little bit in the back right here. I don't want a long thing going on. So I teach in that manner as well. So one of the things that I learned to do with my staff is to model. So what you want to teach your staff needs to be infused, and it's difficult because it's a shifting of the whole way that you may train or look at how you do things. So when I model, like for example, we looked at concepts. So I chair a board called Snow City Arts, and we do arts education for children in hospitals. And so as the chairman of that board, we looked at our strategic plan and talked about how we would do things. One of our pillars for the strategic plan was anti-racism, and we wanted to infuse that. But it wasn't necessarily a pillar in and of itself. So we didn't want to just say, these are the things we're checking off for anti-racism. But we looked at anti-racism as a ribbon that flowed through every other thing that we did. How does anti-racism impact every other pillar? And so instead of looking at it as its own pillar, we looked at it as this umbrella that touched every other thing that we did. And so, for example, if I'm talking about customer service, I want to look at how customer service touches everything that I do. So when I do a training, I'm giving customer service in the middle of the training. When I train on technology, I talk about how those technological pieces are integrated with customer service. So I may say, when I, open up my electronic medical record, I ask the person these questions, like, are you comfortable? What's happening? These kind of things. I make sure that it's a private space so that I'm not giving them, but I do it in micro sections woven throughout everything that I do, so that it's not this entire section of things where I'm talking about just this subject. It's hard. It's not the most easy thing to do, but it's an easier way. The other thing is, think about other ways in which to teach. So for example, I don't always use myself or my words. So I might send a video. I might make a video. I might use something from someone else to show them how to do those kind of things. And that adoption tends to be a lot better. The other thing that I do is make it happen in a couple of different ways. So I may write it. There are still those people that are kind of more didactic, that are going to look at stuff in that way. But I may show it in several different ways, functions, and formats. And also having people try stuff, hugely helpful. Having people try stuff is hugely helpful. So I would say that. I would also say that, if you do have to give information, like that, and you need to send out emails, succinctness is important. I mean, critically important to be succinct. And, you may even want to send out more than one thing and talk about a very specific subject.
Yeah. Jeremy, if I could ask Lupe, can you think of one quick example you could give us that's getting frustrating, you're trying to get it across? Can you give us an example? You're muted.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the different forms of communication. We use Slack, we use email, we join Zoom. And I think for me is when I give a directive of like, here's the next thing I want you to do. It's like I'm repeating myself. And so I'm questioning am I not connecting with the person with what I'm saying? Is it too vague? like how it's a soft skill to understand what I'm trying to ask you, but then how do I communicate to them, letting them know like I'm asking something of you. Review this Excel sheet and put in the list of tasks that you have to do. So do I gotta list it out? Yes, that's exactly what I just said before. So I'm constantly repeating something that I'm asking them to do in different ways. So I definitely do get the numerous times sending different nudges or notification or reminders. And I do different types of ways, but there is a point where it does get overwhelming, where it's like, well, how else can I communicate if I'm just asking something of you? Now that's like, now I'm kind of like trying to figure out like, should I create a task, an agenda of a rolling task for them to see it, and then I can visually tell them. So I definitely, I do agree. I guess it takes a multiple efforts to kind of communicate what you want.
Okay.
But I got to put in a lot of time. It's not just one person, it's a full person. So now I'm trying to rethink my training process. Well, that was helpful. So I think it's my onboarding of how to bring in this person, because as I go through and leverage my impact of supporting this person, I've also taken a lot on my plate because I knew that they weren't able there yet. But there's a time where it's like, I have to now push it to them and make them feel comfortable that they need to kind of understand that I need you to kind of start rolling with me on this, because we're a very small organization. So for me, it's difficult to not see that this person is kind of gaining some of the confidence, because that's what I asked her in our supervision. Is it the lack of confidence that you keep on asking me to repeat what I just asked you, or is it that you don't understand what I'm saying? So that's where I'm kind of stuck at right now.
And the other thing is this, two things that I would add, because I got to kind of get through some other stuff, but two things that I would add to that. One is that one of the strategies that I also found effective is that I begin with the request in my communication with what I need and by what date very early in the communication. So I might say, the email title is whatever, but I'm going to say, I need this by this date. This is what's important in this email, is I need this by this day. Of anything else, I'm going to tell you what it is that I need. But the other thing is that although millennials may have some of these nuances, it is not an excuse for a lack of doing the work and getting it done in the way that you have asked. So in that directive, if you have said, I need this by this date, and that does not occur, there is still a level. So I've had to fire people. I have had to discipline people. I've had to do all of that. And that still has to occur, even if you're trying to retain and do things like that. And so you may be dealing with somebody who may not need to be on the team, or may, need some other kind of intervention. So I do want to say that although I want you to look at compassion and diversity and inclusion, you also still have the same requirements for these millennials as you would for anybody else. So here's the other thing. So impatience is huge, right? So that was another thing that we saw in the video. Impatience is huge, but it's huge for our society in general. But look at this. Remember that younger generations have grown up with the ability to get most things very quickly. So we can currently order things online that arrive the next day. We can binge watch entire seasons of shows. We have food delivered in moments and access almost any information in an instant, right? So there's no waiting, there's none of that. Even for me, who remembers dial-up and sitting there, I'm waiting for the image to load as it came, that's not happening for other people now, right? So you want to be succinct in communication, first of all. That's huge. Leverage younger generations to help create succinct messaging. So that's a huge thing. So just like you do it for technology, talk to them about how they would communicate certain things. So that helped me a lot, especially when I was dealing with staff that was like 22, 21, to say, hey, I'm trying to get this message across, or say this. What would you say? How would you say it? What would you do? Utilize intergenerational groups to make sure all the information is included, but is to the point. So if you have a problem like Lupe might have mentioned, you may talk to a group of people and say, hey, we're trying to roll out this. I want you guys to think about a communication plan for this. How would you do that? And have intergenerational people do that. And you're going to find that your older generation is going to make sure all the information is included, and your younger generation is going to make sure that it's short. How do I get all this information and shorten it up? So that's something that me and my aunt work very well to do together, because she's going to give you all the information and I'm going to say, shorten it up. Let's make it short. So that's going to happen. Break down larger goals into smaller, more quickly achievable goals and provide regular feedback on the progress. The reason why I say that is we look at Instagram and stuff like that, and we're getting instant feedback on stuff. It happens like that. We get the instant feedback. And so what happens is we're used to saying we have a strategic plan that's going on for 3 years, right? 3 years is the strategic plan, and we're going to talk about how we did in year 1 or maybe quarter 1. And you're talking to someone who gets feedback in minutes. I post something, I get likes right away. Or I post something and nobody likes it or whatever, but I might take it down, whatever happens. We get instant feedback. And then you go from getting feedback quarterly, monthly, maybe even annually, if you're on top of your reviews and things like that. And that is going to be the biggest recipe for disengagement of a millennial person. You want to give smaller, bite-sized chunks of the goal. So if my goal is to make $50,000 in this quarter, then I want to break that down by month. I want to break that down by week. And I want to say, hey, this week we met our goal. I want to be excited about it. We met it for the week. We met it for the day. We did this kind of stuff. And this is how what you did impacted that goal. And it may seem kind of asinine sometimes. Oh, are we doing that? Why do we have to do that? But it really, really helps to engage all of the time. This is where we're going and this is what we're doing. And here's the feedback for doing that. Because sometimes you feel like, man, I've been working here and, nothing's happened. What am I doing? How is what I'm doing adding? So if you have a goal, please break it down. It would help a lot. The last thing is environment. And I want to make sure that we're good on time of getting there. So the environment that has been created in the workplaces does not always account for parenting, technology, impatience, and environmental factors that we've talked about. So the applications for this is creating trusting environments where feedback is bi-directional and questions are encouraged. You want to make sure that this is an environment where people can ask questions, where they feel good about asking questions, where you ask questions, and that they can even give you feedback. Teach technology quickly and soft skills slowly. That's a reiteration. Listen through results and observation, and positive reinforcement is critical. So you want to give that good with the bad and do all of that kind of stuff so that it's there for them to receive that. The other thing is you want to sometimes rephrase your questioning. So like my aunt always says, the right questions are critical. So it's not just about asking questions, but how you ask them. So not just like if you're looking at a social media marketing campaign, you don't want to just say, how would you engage young people? You want to treat it more like a focus group. Get information and pull it from them, because sometimes they don't even know what, they want or what you're asking. So you might be saying, where do you get your information from? So you can first break that down. Where do you get that information from? How do you get healthcare? Where do people get this product that we're talking to? And then sometimes present the concept and see what comes from the group, so that the question is more open-ended. And so those are some small strategies to use overall when we look at how this group has come about. So let's talk a little bit, because we don't have as much time as I wanted to have, but what are some questions that you have and some scenarios that you may have to look at in terms of engaging your millennial counterparts or younger counterparts?
Kristen put something in chat to you, Jeremy. Maybe Kristen might unmute. She says, I'm learning to relate better with my millennial daughters. Your information's eye-opening, aha moments. I don't know what those moments are. So I see Kristen, if you'd unmute, she's in the chat. Kristen? There she is. We can't hear you. It might be because of your headphones.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I have two daughters. One's 31, the other's 34. And, my older one has ADHD. And, even as she was a kid, Jeremy, some of the things you're talking about, breaking things down into smaller parts, was she couldn't clean up a whole mess in the room. You had to say blue parts, red parts, green parts, or, specific game or something. but I understand a little bit more when, I say something on the phone with one who's in California and she totally shuts down and, gets off the phone. Like, that's it. I'm not talking anymore. You just overstepped that boundary with something you asked. And so some of the things you're sharing are really helpful.
Good.
I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that.
That's great.
Others in the room, observations, questions, things like that.
Michelle, you've been taking a lot of notes. What's going on?
I'm just writing down a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't work with too many millennials directly, but a lot of the folks who work for me do. And, part of our concern has been keeping people in jobs. So I'm taking a lot of notes on how to keep folks engaged. I think some of these smaller goals that's a really interesting idea because, we often give like monthly feedback or things like, but breaking it down to weekly with some of our teams might help people reach some of those goals rather than be disengaged. So I took a lot of notes.
Right.
So what I find sometimes challenging is that I'm not always anticipating where younger people are going to be different than I'm anticipating. So for example, like I said last time, I work in research, so we put in like a lot of grant applications and stuff. And one of my younger, newer colleagues didn't realize she should be checking her email so much. Like I can't even like, of course you do. Like I can't even anticipate that that's going to be something, because she's so used to having more like instant kind of communications with people. The emails are just sort of something you get around to, but basically that's how we do most of our communication. So that's what I understand a lot of the things you're saying. So trying to look at their perspective, but maybe I'm not enough in their shoes to even know to anticipate some of the things that I'm coming across.
So honestly, you want to take it almost to, and I hate to say, because look, like I don't want to sound like millennials are not slow. We're not, out here just terrible or stuff like that. But it is where you want to take it to work. So the things that you could think about work environment etiquette is probably the best stuff that you could look at. Like how do we dress? How do we check emails? What is the expectation for this? What is the stuff that you think is really mundane? Is stuff that so the way that I would think about it is, what are some of the things you learned on your first job about working? And that will help you to relate in that way, because even thinking about like what is the expectation for emails or phone calls or your voicemail? So the thing is, like, for younger people, voicemail is not a thing. We don't check voicemail. We're not looking at that. That's not something that, so even when we started looking at our patient population, calling and leaving messages was just mute points. Like the patients were like, especially our younger patients, you left me a voicemail, I didn't check that. I don't, they would come in irate because their doctor had, called off or whatever. We called you, we left you a message. What do you mean? I never saw that. And so looking at, okay, we got to pivot to text message because this is the group that we're dealing with. I think that's one thing. The other thing is definitely to engage in looking at your observations, like I was saying before. As you observe, write it down. And really, you may need modules or things on those tips. So if you're noticing, okay, I see that you haven't checked your email. You've got 300 emails here. Let's see what, this is what, you may need to take on as something. But what I want to say to you is that it can be daunting, like Lupe talked about, but understanding that it's going to be a shift and a turn of the types of training that you're doing. So things that you may need more of, a millennial may need less of. And that doesn't mean technology. That could be an example, but there are certain things that you're going to shift on. And so remember that that's what's happening. So instead of keeping all this other training the same and just adding a bunch on top of it, think about the shift and how that's gonna be effective.
Yeah. The thing I liked, Anne, about your question and then Jeremy, your answer, we do not want to lower expectations. In the public school system, there's a lot that's been written. Do not lower your expectations. As Jeremy said, if email is the way we communicate here, we're not gonna, you need to know that. So someone mentioned that earlier. I think it was Bridget maybe talked about expectations. So that needs to be clear. That really does need to be clear, and we don't want to lower expectations. Jeremy, I'm kind of interested, and I see that you have something here in the chat, but I wanted to come back to if she's still here. Robin, you're a millennial in this group. What does it feel like? You're listening, you're hearing us who are not millennials, you're engaging with Jeremy. What does this feel like, you're being in this room? What came up for you, or what's coming up for you as you sit here? Anything you can share? You still there, Robin? There she
I
is.
feel put on the spot. Yes, I'm still here. Well, something that just keeps coming up for me is now making sense being in my particular work environment. Just a little bit more patience is necessary with us, because I've only been here for 2 years, but I'm certain things seem like I'm supposed to already know it. You know, communication could be a little bit better, but you know, we're working on that.
Right.
So I think one thing based on what you just said,
I
Robin,
have to go to
I'm sorry. Oh, she's okay.
I was saying I have to know more of what's expected. That's very true.
Okay, got it. And so that makes a lot of sense in terms of that. And I want you to think about it in this way. Think about somebody, and maybe you're very good at it. You could be good at it or not, or whatever, but think about somebody trying to either teach you or you trying to teach your parent. I gave this example in the last time about social media when it came out. Somebody sitting there and saying, you know, click on this, click on that, do this, do this, do that. And then when you don't, the person is very frustrated with you. You know, why aren't you doing it that way? You know, you should just do this. You should be able to post, put this on your story, do this, do that way. Or when you're trying to teach a parent about it and it's just nauseating to be like, okay, this is the remote, this is how it works, this is what I'm doing. And you're just frustrated. That same level of frustration that you have or that a millennial might have with you is what's happening because it's something innate to them. So to you, it is innate to send an email. It is innate to do certain things. You've been working for a while. It's been indoctrinated in you at earlier ages. So for example, we did not have the same expectation of children in terms of working and school and all of that were put on some of the baby boomers, that same level of expectation. And so there are some things that are so innate to you that it frustrates you that someone does not know how to do it because you've been doing it since you were 12, since you were 13, since you were 14. In the same way, millennials and especially Generation Z has been indoctrinated with technology so much that when you don't know how to do it, it frustrates them to no end. And so we're frustrated with each other because you're supposed to know this and they're supposed to know this. And I think when we understand that, you come into it with a different lens to understand, hey, you know, we're both coming at this from different spaces and different times. And that's how, you know, you want to see it. You both have things that you're bringing to the table, but the frustration does not help anyone to learn either thing.
That's great. That's a great way to bridge that gap, which is our subtitle here, bridging that gap. Both bring what they bring, and then how do you bring that? How do you bridge that together? We are at the bottom of the hour. Jeremy, thank you. I took notes on that one. And you says, I feel like I can take many things and apply to my parenting skills with my kids. I know what you mean. My goodness, this was great. Jeremy had me put in the chat. So the tool that he's reading from with the application is uploaded in the chat. It's a PDF version. If you can't get it, Daniela is going to email you. She had to step away. She'll email that so you can use, and you'll see what he was suggesting. And then there's room for you to engage and think through even more. I thank you all for being with us. I hope that you were able to glean some things that will help you with the challenges that you may be facing and working with the younger generations. My big thing is questions. I ask all my staff, how do you want to be communicated with? Some have said, I like text. Some have said, I like email. Some have said, I like voicemail. Doesn't make me any difference. Because what my objective is to communicate with you. So I ask how best to communicate with you. And then I just do whatever they say works for them. So if you're trying to retain the next generation, no, you don't want to drop your expectations. But Lupe, if email is not it, find out what is. Find out what is. This training was eye-opening. Robin, you are welcome. Kristen, you're welcome. Jeremy, you have the final word, and then we're gonna let people go.
So my final word is, everyone is unique. And of course, these are not going to blanketly, go across, but they're going to help you, be tips on that. And I hope you'll use them. I do want to recommend a book called, so if you guys are familiar with the 5 Love Languages book, it's typically used for relationship kind of building with a partner, a romantic partner. But they have a version of the book called the 5 Love Languages of the Workplace. And I think that is also helpful to look at people individually and individualize. And so, especially if you don't have a huge team, it's a great way to engage with the people. So I'm going to leave you with that as well. So the 5 Love Languages of the Workplace, check it out. It will be helpful for, you to work with your staff.
Right, right. And you've got our emails. If you need to talk about the next generation, contact Jeremy. That's all I know.
Thank you. I know we're over.
That's quite all right. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And I'll close out the room, Jeremy, if you'll stick around. Daniela had a challenge, so she had to sign out. And then I'll wait for everyone and then close the 2 of us out.
Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bridget, thank you so much, Bridget. I appreciate you so much.